Seattle always carried a strange scent when it rained, half damp, half cold, as if the city itself had been built to guard its secrets. I arrived at Holloway Analytics on one of those mornings. The sky was gray, a fine mist settling over the slick pavement, reflecting streaks of headlights and the glow of office windows. My umbrella was smaller than the rain, and I hurried across puddles, my mind fixed only on the report I had to submit before 10 o'clock. My name is Elena Ross. I've been the compliance director of this company for 5 years. No one at Holloway knows the internal audit system better than I do. I'm not the type who talks much or seeks attention. I just like things to run properly, every number matching every process. But that morning, the moment I stepped into the lobby, something felt wrong. The air was off, thick, heavy, unnervingly quiet. People spoke more softly than usual or pretended to be busy. The clacking of keyboards sounded scattered, like someone had just turned off the usual background hum of the office. I passed the reception desk. The morning shift girl looked down nervously. A small group of employees clustered near the coffee machine, then scattered like startled birds as I walked by. I caught a whisper of my name, then silence when I turned my head. A chill crawled down my back, even though the building's air was warm. I swiped my badge at the security gate. Red light. I tried again, still red. A third time, nothing. The guard looked at me with that knowing expression people get when they already know how the story ends. His voice was gentle, almost apologetic. You should go see Human Resources. They're waiting for you on the 12th floor. The 12th floor, HR, the top of the building. I stepped into the elevator, my hand tightening around my bag. Inside, there was only the hum of the air conditioner and the steady tick of my watch. I took a deep breath, forcing calm. I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. I'd stayed at the office past midnight last night, finishing the data reconciliation for the government project. Everything was precise, flawless. But something in the air told me this wasn't about work. The doors slid open. The hallway was long and white, still smelling faintly of disinfectant. I walked toward the HR office, and there, right in the middle of the glass wall, I saw my face. A photo from last month's conference, me standing at the podium, serious, focused. Beneath it, written in red marker, needs discipline. And next to it, smaller words, messy and rushed, compliance gone rogue. No one spoke when I approached. 3 people stood frozen in the HR office. One pressed her lips tight. Another pretended to read paperwork. The air conditioner hummed above us. 1 second. 2. 10. I just stared at the photo, and suddenly I felt nothing. Not anger, not shame, just a hollow stillness. Something beyond fury, the kind of emptiness that comes when you've already reached the end of yourself. I knew there was only one person in this company with the authority and the arrogance to do this. Marcus Hale stepped out from the side door, still the same, tailored suit, dark blue tie, paper coffee cup in hand, that half smile glued to his face. He looked at me like this was all a joke we were supposed to enjoy together. Don't take it so seriously, Elena, he said casually. It's just a reminder for everyone to stay cooperative. A little accountability, that's all. I met his eyes, saying nothing for a few seconds. Maybe he expected me to shout, to demand the photo be taken down, but I didn't. My voice came out low, even, cold as steel. You just made a mistake, Marcus. One you won't recognize, at least not today. His eyebrow twitched. The smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. I saw irritation flash behind his eyes. Don't overreact, Elena. Everyone knows you can be a bit rigid. Think of this as a chance to adjust. He turned and walked away, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and a suffocating stillness. The HR staff avoided my gaze. The youngest of them finally looked up, trembling a little. I'm sorry, she whispered. This wasn't my call. I nodded. No blame. In this office, fear had become the only common language. I walked down the hall into the main workspace. No one dared look at me. The sound of typing filled the air again, hollow and fake. I picked up my bag, removed the nameplate from my desk, and tucked it neatly inside. My coffee mug, white, printed with "I check twice before you speak once," was still half full, steam gone cold. I left it there. As I passed the glass wall where my photo hung, I looked one last time. The face in the picture looked calm, almost proud. I realized she wasn't me anymore. The woman in that photo had ended her story here. I stepped into the elevator, the doors closed, reflecting my image in the mirror. No anger, no tears, only silence. I knew from that moment on, everything had already begun to shift, even if no one could see it yet. I did not leave the building right away that day. Something in me wanted one last look at the place that had held me for 5 years, even though it had just turned its back on me. I walked slowly down the long corridor toward the small conference room where I had spent hundreds of hours, checking and rechecking every line of data to make sure nothing slipped through. Everything looked familiar. Glass walls, the long meeting table, the whiteboard crowded with audit marks, and the yellow sticky notes I had once taped back together. But one thing had changed. The light in the room felt different, cold and distant, more like a hospital than an office. When I worked here, I believed Holloway was a trustworthy company where professionals could build something right. I was wrong. What I failed to see was that beneath its polished surface, the company ran on internal politics and hubris. At the center of that was Marcus Hale. I first met Marcus during my first year when the company expanded into federal data work. Back then, he was vice chief financial officer, smart, eloquent, able to turn a situation to his favor, and especially good at currying favor with the leadership. I used to think he had foresight. We partnered on many projects. I handled compliance. He handled finance. Once, when a project faced a surprise audit, I saved the team from fines over a small ledger error he had missed. Marcus thanked me, smiled, bought me a coffee, and called me his shield. I laughed then. I never imagined that one day he would be the first to point the knife. 2 months ago, we had a major disagreement during a big review. Marcus wanted to approve an unclear expenditure for the Data Link initiative, a contract worth tens of millions. I checked the records and found discrepancies. There was a payment to a subcontractor with no audit trail. I asked for clarification. He told me to sign and that he would take responsibility. I refused. I do not work that way. The next day, he stopped speaking to me. In meetings, he avoided my eyes. And soon I started hearing whispers around the office that I was difficult to work with, too rigid, not flexible enough. I knew where those whispers started. I stood by the window and watched Marcus below, talking with a cluster of young employees. He moved with confident gestures. His speech could make anyone think he was a decent man, but I had seen what lay behind that mask, a scared man afraid of losing control. When people fear losing power, they will do anything to protect the illusion, even crush others. Elena, a soft voice said behind me. I turned. It was Lydia, the youngest accountant. Her eyes were worried, and she clutched a stack of files. She looked around to make sure no one was listening, then stepped closer and whispered that I should be careful. She said Marcus had been talking with HR all week, and they were calling me uncooperative. She had overheard them in the lunchroom. Lydia lowered her head, voice trembling, and admitted she did not know what they were planning, but that clearly he wanted me gone. I looked at Lydia, her honest eyes hurt. I thanked her quietly and warned her not to let anyone know she had spoken to me. She nodded, fear written across her face, and slipped back to her desk. I knew Lydia would draw attention if anyone discovered she sided with me. In this company, loyalty equaled silence. I returned to my desk and gathered a few last things: an old notebook, the USB with the system source documents, and a photo of the team from our first year. In the picture, Marcus and I were still smiling. I remembered admiring him, believing he was clever and had vision. Now his smile looked so fake it was almost comic. As I prepared to leave, Marcus appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame as if this were an ordinary conversation between colleagues. He remarked that he had not expected me to leave so quickly and that he thought I would fight. I told him I do not fight in dirty games. I said I simply do not participate. He shrugged and walked in, circling my desk. He told me that the problem with people like me was that we believed the rules would always protect us. He emphasized each word slowly, as if carving shame into me. He insisted he wrote the rules. I did not reply. I stood calmly in a way that made him uneasy. Then I said he was right that he wrote the rules, but he had never read the smallest print. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. I told him that soon, every system has a way of teaching the person who controls it a lesson. I left the office and walked past the rows of desks where everyone pretended to be busy. No one looked up or spoke. My footsteps echoed on the stone floor, steady, like a countdown. As I passed the glass where my photo hung, I glanced at it one last time. The red handwriting remained fresh, like a wound not yet healed. I did not tear it down. I left it there because I knew that soon someone else would write beneath it. Not needs discipline, but lesson learned. When the elevator doors closed behind me, I did not look back. There was no need. In my head, a plan had already formed, not for revenge, but to teach Holloway what real discipline looks like. I didn't leave right away. Something pulled me back, made me look one last time at the place where I'd spent my 30s building the safety framework that kept this company alive. I walked slowly through the hallway, the lights reflecting off the cold floor. Every corner carried a memory: the chair I once fixed, the notes left on the whiteboard, the pen I picked up during a late night shift. Those small, ordinary things proved I had been here, not just as an employee, but as the person who kept the whole machine steady. I went back to my desk, opened the drawer, and took what mattered: the small green plant still alive, the portable charger, the USB drive holding data backups, and a photo of my old team. I left the laptop behind. The system I built could run without me now. Everything was arranged so that if someone touched it, the truth would speak for itself. Before leaving, I stopped in front of the HR glass wall. My picture was taped at the center with a red label screaming, "Needs discipline." I stared at it for a long time. The same person who once called me a shield had turned me into a joke. For a moment, I thought about exposing everything, but the thought faded fast. I'd tried noise before, and all it gave me was exhaustion. This time I chose silence, the kind that forces people to find their own answers. I sat in my car as rain blurred the windshield. The headlights behind me looked like cold eyes staring through the glass. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm. I wasn't afraid. I just wanted to make sure everything unfolded exactly as planned. I didn't need an explosion. I needed precision. I remembered why I created those protective layers. When the company started handling federal contracts, I knew one impulsive decision from leadership could cause irreversible damage. So I wrote a protocol, not just a document, but an embedded access code inside the system itself. I called it Code E7.4. It sounded dry, but it was the only thing keeping chaos out. If any executive account was disabled without proper authorization, all major transactions would automatically lock, triggering alerts and requiring dual verification. At the same time, the system would back up the logs and send them to an external safe address, one only I and two others knew. Simply put, E7.4 didn't destroy, it safeguarded. Like a lock that seals itself when someone forces the door, it slowed things down, but never broke them. I didn't write it out of revenge. I wrote it to protect the company from those who believed they couldn't be wrong. I opened the admin app on my phone. The familiar interface appeared. I entered the authentication code and scanned my fingerprint. The emergency option showed a single line: Activate E7.4, credential lock. I hesitated for a few seconds. I wasn't doing this to hurt anyone. I thought of Lydia, her voice shaking when she said she was afraid of being blamed. I thought of the employees forced to bend, the rules, the contractors still unpaid. They deserved a system that knew when to stop. I tapped the button. A warning popped up, confirming that all transactions above $10,000 would pause until verified. I entered my top-tier password and pressed confirm. No anger, no trembling, just absolute clarity. A line appeared: E7.4, activated. Automatic emails went to the legal department and partner banks. The system logged everything: timestamp, user ID, reason, emergency activation by compliance director. I took a photo, then deleted it right away. I didn't need evidence. I wanted the truth to run on its own. I leaned back and looked at the small plant on the passenger seat, still green as ever. I thought about the years I had carried this system, the people who called me rigid, too demanding. They never understood that rigidity was the only thing holding it all together. Marcus thought I was an obstacle. He never realized I was the reason this company still stood. I started the car and rolled out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, the Holloway building glowed faintly, my photo on the HR glass still burning red like an open wound. I whispered, not revenge, a reminder. The rain grew heavier as I drove. I turned on the radio. A soft saxophone melody filled the car. Seattle was wrapped in gray mist, yet I felt lighter. No calls, no messages, only silence. I wanted them to feel this emptiness, the moment when someone disappears and everything they once dismissed starts to break. I knew the next few hours would be chaos. Emergency meetings, panicked emails, blame flying everywhere. Marcus would probably lose his mind, maybe even try to fix it. But I wouldn't go back. I'd done enough. I had protected what was worth protecting. As I left the city, the rain came down harder. I smiled to myself, not out of joy or spite, just peace. Some storms don't need anyone to start them. Sometimes you just remove the hand that's holding the wrong beam and everything collapses the way it should. I fastened my seatbelt and closed my eyes for a moment, letting the rain tap softly on the roof. Every sound in my head faded, leaving only the rhythm of the storm and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that this time I had chosen the right kind of silence. I wasn't at the Holloway office the next morning, but I didn't need to be. I could picture everything as if I were sitting in the boardroom, hearing every uneasy breath as things began to unravel. Code E7.4 didn't make noise when it activated, but its effects echoed through every corner of the company. At 7:45 in the morning, Lydia walked in as usual, carrying a large cup of coffee, her hair still damp from the mist. Her monitor lit up with a stream of red alerts. Authorization failed, transaction hold, dual verification required. She thought it was a temporary glitch, but when she tried to rerun the vendor payment batch, another unfamiliar message appeared. E7.4 compliance lock triggered. She frowned. Only Marcus, I, and a small part of the IT team had ever known about that code, but Marcus had never cared for technical details. When Lydia opened the finance group chat, she saw she wasn't the only one with problems. Messages flooded the screen. Batch 6 stuck again? Systems rejecting all vendor payments. Who revoked access for compliance? Marcus? We need your approval here. Up on the 10th floor, Marcus sat in his glass office, sipping coffee and scrolling through emails. He liked quiet mornings, the kind where everyone waited for his cue. When Lydia knocked, he didn't even look up. What is it, Lydia? Can't you see I'm busy? The vendor payments won't process, sir. The system's asking for dual verification from compliance, but Ms. Ross's credentials have been deactivated. We can't complete any transactions. Marcus frowned. Probably a server update. Call IT. I did. They said it's not a server issue. It's an access control problem. What control problem? I'm the CFO. I have ultimate authority. Lydia said nothing. For the first time, she saw real confusion on his face. When she left, he grabbed the phone and dialed the internal IT line. I could picture it clearly, his voice rising, trying to sound composed. Why is the system blocking payments? I've already verified my access level. The technician hesitated. Sir, it looks like code E7.4 has been activated. It's holding all high-value transactions until they're cleared by compliance and legal. E7.4? I never turned anything like that on. Disable it. I'm sorry, sir. That protocol can't be deactivated from an admin account. It requires two-tier approval. Marcus's tone hardened. I am the highest approval tier. Yes, sir, but the internal policy places code E7.4 under the authority of the compliance director, and that person is... Silence stretched on the line. The technician didn't finish the sentence. Ross, Marcus muttered, his voice rough. As he ordered an emergency meeting, the error alerts spread like wildfire. From finance to accounting to contracts, every department started reporting the same issue. Vendor emails poured in one after another. Payment for this week is still pending. Please confirm. Logistics fee stuck in bank queue. We need an explanation for the delay before shipping the next batch. People whispered. No one dared say it out loud, but they all knew why. Elena Ross, the only person who fully understood the system's financial core, was gone. And just hours after her departure, everything had jammed. Marcus walked into the main conference room, followed by Lydia and two finance leads. The white light glared off the glass walls, highlighting the sweat forming on his forehead. Listen, he snapped. This is just a temporary glitch. We'll fix it within the hour. It is restoring access. One team lead spoke carefully. Sir, they said it needs dual approval from compliance and legal. Ms. Ross was the last to update the protocol. We can't override that. Nonsense, Marcus slammed the table. We don't need the signature of someone who's no longer with the company. I control the budget. I'll override everything myself. He opened his laptop, logged into the internal system, and entered his emergency credentials. The screen flashed. Access denied. Unauthorized override attempt detected. He tried again. Same result. A third time, and the system flashed another warning. Repeated unauthorized override attempts will trigger full lockout. The room went silent. Lydia saw a vein pulse on his wrist as his fingers trembled. Mr. Hale, she said softly, I think it's best to stop. This is a safety protocol. Maybe we should coordinate with legal first before. Quiet, he shouted, making her flinch. She was just an employee. I run this company. No one but me locks down finances. He stormed out, his voice echoing down the hallway. Call security. Restore my account now. I want a transaction report before lunch. But beneath that panic, the system continued doing what it was built to do: protect itself. Each time someone tried to tamper with it, Code E7.4 automatically backed up data and sent copies to the partner bank and the federal audit contact. They didn't know that. I did. All morning, Holloway drowned in quiet chaos. No one dared say my name, yet it glowed on every monitor. Access request pending. Ross E. A reminder that my presence hadn't been erased. By noon, a few employees whispered over lunch in the cafeteria. She told us not to touch her system, someone murmured. She wasn't sabotaging it. She was protecting it. Somewhere upstairs, Marcus still tried to act composed, pretending he was in control. But when the partner calls started coming in one after another, I knew that calm was starting to crack. Then, around 3 in the afternoon, exactly as I expected, all transactions over $10,000 froze completely. The bank sent confirmation emails, noting the activation of a parallel lock mode and requesting compliance verification before reactivation. No one had that authority anymore. Marcus stood in his office, staring at a screen flooded in red warnings, eyes wide. I could almost see his hand crushing the paper coffee cup in frustration. I sat in a small cafe by the harbor, warm yellow light spilling over the wooden table. My phone buzzed once. A message from an old colleague at Holloway. Just 2 words. It started. I smiled faintly, not out of joy, but because I knew I'd been right. No noise, no anger. The system itself was teaching the very lesson Marcus once thought only he could teach. When I left the cafe, the rain had returned, light drops tapping against my coat. I looked up at the steel gray sky. Everything was moving as it should, and I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. Marcus didn't sleep that night. After an entire afternoon surrounded by phone calls, emails full of question marks, and colleagues avoiding his gaze in the hallway, he still tried to convince himself it was just a temporary technical glitch. He drank half a bottle of whiskey alone in his office, staring at the city lights reflected in the glass wall. But in that dim glow, the reflection staring back wasn't the image of a powerful chief financial officer. It was a man losing control, clinging to the last illusion of power he had left. By 6:30 the next morning, Marcus was already at the office, earlier than everyone else. He didn't want anyone to see his impatience, though it was written in every step he took. The coffee on his desk went cold. He opened his laptop, trying to access the financial system again, testing every admin role, every emergency password. All were blocked. The screen repeated the same line over and over: access restricted pending dual authorization. A wave of helplessness rose in him like nausea. He told himself there was no way he would let a woman who had already left the company bring him down like this. Impossible. He had handled million-dollar negotiations, slipped through dozens of audits, convinced the board that violations were just technical errors. One security protocol from Elena Ross couldn't be the end of him. No way, he muttered, then grabbed his phone and dialed an old number. A man's voice answered, rough and drawn out. "Long time, Marcus. I assume you've got something interesting for me?" "Jax," Marcus said quietly, "I need you to unlock a system. My account's locked, and my IT team is useless." A short laugh. "You're asking me to hack your own company's network? You forget I used to work at Holloway? That compliance architecture's triple encrypted. It's not simple." "I don't care if it's simple," Marcus snapped. "Just do it. I'll pay double, triple if you succeed." There was a pause on the line. "Send me the credentials. I'll take a look." He hung up, opened his email, and forwarded Jax the admin logs and the latest access records. His only thought now was that if he could break through, he'd prove Elena was nothing but a petty engineer trying to get even. He'd regain control, erase the traces, and make HR release a statement naming her as the source of the breach. He wanted her name smeared. He needed that power back. 2 hours later, Jax texted, "I'm in, but something's off. The security layer doesn't look like standard enterprise code. It's more like government-level internal audit encryption." Marcus frowned, smirking. "She really thought she could scare me. Just do it." "Marcus, if I touch this layer wrong, the system could send logs externally. I'm seeing a hidden connection. Looks like it reports to an address outside Holloway. This is risky." "Just unlock it. I'll take the blame," Marcus said, then ended the call. As Jax began the intrusion, the system logged every click. A small alert window popped up in the data center. "Unauthorized third-party intrusion detected. Mirror log protocol initiated." Mirror log, the secondary safeguard I had built into code E7.4. Any unauthorized access attempt would record the entire session, compress it, and send it to two places: the Federal Audit and Review Unit, a FAR unit, and a secure legal backup inbox within Holloway's internal network. I never told Marcus about it. I didn't need to. The system would speak for me. That afternoon, Lydia received a notification from the tech center. She was still struggling to manage a flood of vendor emails when her monitor suddenly flashed a warning. "Security alert. External access detected from CFO account." She froze. Before she could react, her phone rang. It was Marcus. "Lydia, don't interfere. It's just a security test I'm running. Ignore any alerts." His voice was tight, rushed. Lydia hesitated. "But the system says it's unauthorized access from your account. Did you not hear me? Ignore it." She bit her lip. Fear and suspicion churned inside her. When he hung up, she opened her recorder app and saved the entire call. Her instincts told her this would matter later. By 5 o'clock, the IT team detected data packets leaving the network. A technician shouted, "We've got unauthorized transfers. It's sending to an address ending in @fargov.us." Panic rippled through the room. Marcus rushed in, snatching a keyboard. "Stop it! Shut the system down!" But it was too late. The final data packet had already been sent. In Washington, inside the FAR unit office, an automated email appeared on a government monitor. Subject: Unauthorized access report. Holloway Analytics CFO account. Attached: mirror log. Red.json. Within 10 minutes, the federal system flagged a potential federal financial data breach. A provisional investigation was opened. All accounts linked to Holloway and to its highest level administrator, Marcus Hale, were frozen pending review. When the notice came through, Marcus was still in his office, sweat beading on his forehead. He stared at the red line on his screen. System access suspended pending federal review. Panic surged. He grabbed his phone, meaning to call me. A voice in his head whispered, "Elena will answer. She wanted this." He typed a message instead. "I know you're watching. You've gone too far. You won't get away with this." I read the message from my apartment, the soft yellow light spilling over the desk. I set the phone down without replying. Then I typed 3 words. I drew lines. There was no response. I looked out the window at the still, bright city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was unraveling. Not because I had destroyed him, but because he had stepped on the very rules I'd written to protect him. I knew the FAR unit would come. I wasn't afraid. I had never done anything wrong, and more importantly, everything was documented. Every command, every signature. I didn't need to shout to prove I was right. The truth would speak in the system's own voice. Meanwhile, at Holloway, Marcus sat in darkness, lights off, the only glow coming from the blinking computer screen. For the first time, he felt what I had felt when I saw my photo pinned on the glass, the quiet humiliation that couldn't be defended. But unlike me, he had no one left to pity him, only the silence he created for himself. I got the email from the FAR unit early the next morning, just as the sun rose over the rooftops across the street. The subject line was brief: Preliminary Audit Notification, Holloway Analytics. The message was direct. They had received the file mirrorlogred.json, launched a preliminary investigation, and temporarily frozen several related accounts. They requested my cooperation and asked for supporting information within 24 hours. I sat still for a moment, my hand resting on my coffee cup. Not afraid, just heavy. I knew this would come. Mirrorlog was designed to send itself the moment anyone tried to breach the system. It was simply doing its job. I opened my laptop, drafted a reply, attached a short technical summary of code E7.4, and confirmed my readiness to cooperate. After sending it, I leaned back in my chair and drew a deep breath. I wasn't being hunted, yet for the first time in years, I felt myself standing in the narrow space between justice and misunderstanding. While I waited for their response, Holloway was already sinking into chaos. A few messages from former colleagues came through. Marcus is losing it, one of them wrote. He's saying you planted a virus in the system. I didn't reply. I knew exactly how he reacted. Attack first, think later. What he didn't understand was that code E7.4 wasn't a bomb. It was a mirror. It only reflected the actions of whoever touched it. At noon, Lydia sent me a short message. I have the recording of Marcus's call yesterday morning. I asked her to confirm, and a few minutes later, the audio file arrived. Marcus's voice came through, harsh, hurried, impatient. Ignore the alerts. Just override. I'll take responsibility. The clip lasted barely over a minute, but it was enough for me to know the FAR unit needed to hear it. That afternoon, I drafted an email to the investigator listed in the notice. Dear Mr. Anders, I'm attaching the mirror log data and an audio file supporting the unauthorized access finding. All of my actions followed proper compliance procedures. I hit send. No long explanations. I knew the system was capable of telling its own story. 2 days passed. I left the city for a while, spending the morning at the harbor, watching the gray sky ripple on the water. I needed the quiet to remind myself that I was still human among all these cold procedures. When my phone rang, I already knew who it was. A calm, steady male voice said, Ms. Ross, this is Agent Anders from the FAR unit. We've reviewed your data. We may need you to walk us through how code E7.4 functions. I agreed immediately. The next day, the meeting took place in a small FAR unit office. Anders sat across from me with 2 data forensics engineers. They opened the mirror log red.json file, and I explained each line, the activation timestamp, the encryption process, and the system's automated responses to unauthorized access. They asked questions, carefully, not accusingly, just seeking to understand. At the end, Anders looked up and said, Your protocol's logic is clear. It couldn't have been triggered manually from outside. The unauthorized activity seems to trace back to the CFO's account. I nodded, saying nothing. They had seen what I already knew. Later that afternoon, FAR Unit issued an internal notice to Holloway. CFO Marcus Hale's account was suspended pending investigation. I heard the update from Lydia, her voice shaking. They came into his office around 3. No one said a word. That night, I received another email from the FAR unit. Thank you for your cooperation. Preliminary findings confirm that the unauthorized access originated from the CFO's account. You are not under review. We may request additional input during the detailed analysis phase. I finished reading and smiled faintly, not out of victory, but relief. No need to speak, no need for revenge. Just let the system speak for itself. Meanwhile, at Holloway, Marcus sat in a closed conference room, surrounded by lawyers and legal representatives. No one looked at him. Only the sounds of papers turning and keyboards tapping filled the space. He tried to argue that he'd only been running diagnostics, but every log, every email, every recording pointed in one direction. The FAR unit already knew. He no longer had the privilege of calling it a technical issue. I ended that day with a short call from Anders. He said, "The fascinating part is that you didn't break anything. You simply took your hands off the wheel and it veered off the road on its own." I replied, "All I wanted was for them to understand that discipline isn't punishment. It's a boundary to keep people from harming themselves." When the call ended, I set the phone down and looked out the window. The rain had started again. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. The FAR unit was in control. The truth was surfacing, and I didn't need to touch anything else. Marcus, the man who once believed he had absolute control, was now forced to learn, through the very system he had dismissed, the first real lesson of his life. No one stands above the rules, especially when those rules were written by someone who truly understands them. The morning of the final meeting, I woke up with a strange calm, not nervousness, but a quiet clarity. I had prepared everything I could: timelines, logs, email threads, and a concise presentation explaining how code E7.4 functioned. I knew I would have to face Marcus in a room designed to make people feel small, but I wasn't one of them. I hadn't done this to win a personal battle. I had done it to show what happens when a procedure is treated like an inconvenience. The meeting took place in Holloway's main conference room. A long wooden table, leather chairs, one-way glass walls overlooking the city. On the table sat the documents I had submitted, printouts from Mirror Log, copies of emails, and a formal letter from the FAR unit. Marcus entered with his tie slightly crooked, his face more hollow than I'd ever seen it. Around him sat the legal team, several board members, and a representative from the FAR unit, Agent Anders. The air felt heavy. Everyone was quieter than usual, waiting for something inevitable. Anders began, his tone steady and professional. He summarized the preliminary investigation, what Miralog had recorded, and stated that the meeting's purpose was to hear directly from the involved parties, gather context, and clarify accountability. He invited Marcus to speak first. Marcus stood, his voice controlled at the start. He spoke about a technical malfunction, about how he was merely trying to preserve operations, and about the pressure to keep vendors satisfied. He painted his actions as a necessary response, even noble. When he finished, I felt every eye turn toward me, waiting to see how I would respond. I stood, walked to the screen where the system logs were displayed, and began my presentation. My tone was even. I walked them through every step: the day I found the public humiliation, the moment I left the building, and when I triggered E7.4. I explained it technically, but in simple language, clear enough for everyone to follow. I showed them how E7.4 didn't destroy or block, only initiated a protection cycle requiring dual verification and legal oversight. I showed them the log patterns, the timeline, and how Mirrorlog captured each unauthorized access attempt. Marcus reacted immediately, his voice turning from defensive to furious. He accused me of damaging the company's reputation, of creating chaos on purpose. He waved a handful of papers in the air as if they were proof. But when Anders opened the mirror log file on the screen, Marcus's words began to fade. The access trails, IP addresses, and command lines unfolded line by line, and then came the recordings. One from the Holloway technician, another from Marcus's own call to IT, where he ordered them to ignore warnings and proceed with the override. His voice filled the room again, but this time there was no authority in it, only panic. A board member finally spoke, asking why Marcus had tried to override the system when it required dual verification. He stammered, tried to say he was just testing. Anders leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but sharp. Can you point to any internal policy that authorizes you to override Code E7.4 without legal or compliance verification? Marcus said nothing. The silence that followed was thick. Around the table, people exchanged glances. Some shook their heads. That was the moment when the bridge Marcus had stood on for years, his credibility, finally began to crack. I didn't feel triumphant. I simply presented the facts and let the data speak. When asked about motive, I answered plainly, I didn't do this to harm the company. I did it to prevent a disaster that the procedure should have stopped. Anders nodded, took notes, and asked if I was willing to assist the FAR unit during the deeper audit phase. I said yes. The meeting shifted to consequences. Marcus was ordered to relinquish all system access immediately, and the board voted to suspend any financial operations directly approved by him until the investigation concluded. Discussions followed about liability, partner communications, and damage control. Marcus tried to defend himself, but his arguments felt like patchwork on a torn coat, every stitch obvious and failing. When the meeting adjourned, Marcus was escorted out by legal representatives. As he passed me, his eyes met mine. For an instant, there was something beyond anger in them, fear, maybe regret. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then didn't. I didn't respond. The silence between us was heavier than any word. Afterward, the company buzzed with quiet chatter. Lydia texted me. I heard. Everyone's talking. Thank you. I replied simply, be careful. I knew she was still shaken, but she had done the right thing. People like Lydia, quiet, unnoticed, often make the real difference. A few days later, an official notice went out to all staff. CFO Marcus Hale was suspended pending internal and federal investigation. The board called an emergency session to plan next steps. The FAR unit continued working with me and the IT division to further analyze mirror log and trace every access route. Nothing had gone public yet, but the mask Marcus had worn for years was already in pieces. That night, I sat by my apartment window, watching city lights ripple across the water. I didn't feel victorious. I felt relief, like I had completed a duty larger than myself. I remembered what my old mentor once told me. Power isn't meant to be abused. Power is responsibility. And today, that power had finally paid its price for being misused. I turned off the lights, letting the darkness settle over the city, knowing the hardest part was over, but rebuilding trust would take far longer. 2 weeks after the final meeting, everything inside me settled, like the surface of a lake after rain. I left Holloway completely and didn't look back. My small apartment near Lake Union became my new world, a quiet space where I could finally hear the ticking of a clock again. Every morning, I brewed coffee, opened the window, and watched the fog drift over the water. No more meetings, no more reports, just silence, and a calm I hadn't felt in years. I started reading the books that had sat untouched on my shelves for years. I wrote small notes, not about data or finance, but about people, about patience, about the boundaries one must build to avoid being swallowed by power. Sometimes I wondered, if that day Marcus hadn't pinned my photo on the glass, would things have ended differently? Probably not. That act was only the final drop in an already cracking system. I didn't plan to go back to work soon. I wanted everything to stay still for a while. But one afternoon, as I walked around the lake, my phone buzzed. An email from a company I'd never heard of before, Viridian Systems. I opened it and read slowly. We came across your public profile and your work on financial security at Holloway Analytics. The way you designed Code E7.4 reflects a high-level understanding of risk control. We're rebuilding our compliance infrastructure and would like to invite you to collaborate as our Senior Director of Risk. This conversation is confidential and substantive. I read it twice. The tone was different, neither flattering nor corporate. It spoke of understanding, respect for precision, and technical integrity. I typed a short reply. Thank you for reaching out. I'm open to discussing this further. When would you like to talk? An hour later, their response came. Tomorrow morning, 9:00 a.m. We'd like to meet via video call. Our CFO and Chief Legal Officer will be present. That night, I barely slept. Not out of anxiety, but curiosity. I'd met too many organizations claiming to rebuild systems, only to repeat the same mistakes. I wanted to see if they were truly different. The next morning, I sat in front of my laptop, the screen filled with three faces. A silver haired man with sharp but kind eyes introduced himself as Ethan Ward, CFO of Viridian. Beside him was Clara N. Gwynn, Chief Legal Officer, and a younger man who appeared to lead the technical team. They didn't ask about Holloway or Marcus. Instead, Ethan spoke directly. We understand you're not looking to repeat the past. Viridian is expanding into industrial data systems. We want to build something no one can break just because of ego. Not to prevent mistakes, but to teach us how to learn from them. We need someone to design that. I sat quietly for a few seconds. The way he said it made me feel seen, not as someone who caused disruption, but as someone who understood how systems rise and fall. I asked, will I have full authority over the structure and procedures? Clara answered without hesitation. Completely. We're not looking for a temporary fix. We want someone to build the foundation. I didn't need more than that. I nodded. I accept. After the call, I stayed still for a while, feeling something flicker back to life inside me. Not pride, purpose. Maybe that's how the world works. When you finally let go of the old, another door opens. Quietly, clearly. Just enough for you to know it's real. A week later, the contract arrived. I read every clause carefully. No hidden traps, no manipulative language. In the job description, one line made me stop. Design, implement, and oversee compliance and security systems to ensure transparency and ethical operation in financial processes. Just one line, but it meant more to me than any title. On my first day at Viridian, I walked into the building with a feeling completely different from that last day at Holloway. No stares, no forced silence. A young woman greeted me at the lobby with a smile. Welcome to Viridian. We've been waiting for you. My office overlooked the river, sunlight spilling through the windows. On the desk lay a handwritten note. Welcome aboard. Build something that lasts. I touched the paper, my hand trembling slightly. Not from fear, but emotion. After years of working in places where praise was just decoration, I was finally somewhere words carried weight. That afternoon, I met with my new compliance team. 12 people, most of them young, eager, and attentive. I told them, we don't build walls to block mistakes. We build foundations so that when mistakes happen, the system knows how to stop itself before collapsing. That's what discipline should be. The room fell silent. Then a few nods followed. I saw in their eyes the understanding I'd waited years to find. As I left the office that evening, I stood by the glass wall, watching the city lights shimmer across the river. I smiled. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Not because I had won, but because I was finally rebuilding what Marcus had destroyed. Trust. And I knew then, no one would ever pin my photo on a wall again with the words, needs discipline. Because I had learned how to turn discipline into freedom. One May morning, I received a message from an unknown number. Elena, if possible, I'd like to see you. Just 10 minutes. No name, but I knew immediately who it was. I stared at the text for a while, then replied, this afternoon, the old cafe on Harbor Street, 3 o'clock. I wasn't angry, and I wasn't curious either. After everything, I just wanted to hear him speak one last time. That afternoon, Seattle was wrapped in a thin mist. The small cafe where I'd once written business plans looked unchanged. Quiet, the air carrying the scent of coffee and burnt wood. I chose a seat by the window. 5 minutes later, Marcus walked in. No suit, no tie, just a middle-aged man in a wrinkled shirt. He looked around, spotted me, gave a small nod, and sat down. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I broke the silence. I didn't think you'd reach out again. Marcus gave a faint, hoarse laugh. I didn't think I would either, but there are things I need to say. I said nothing. He looked down at his hands, his fingernails tapping softly on the table. The investigation's over. No criminal charges, but I've been barred from working in finance for at least 3 years. Holloway's stock dropped 27%. I lost almost everything. And maybe what eats at me most isn't the money. I stayed quiet. Marcus took a breath. I used to think I could control everyone. I didn't understand that people like you, the ones who keep the building standing, exist. I'm not sorry for wanting to win, Elena, but I am sorry I didn't know who was actually keeping me alive. I looked at him. The arrogance was gone. What remained was the emptiness of someone finally seeing the damage he'd done. You don't need to apologize to me, I said evenly. You need to learn to respect the rules. They're not there to control you, they're there to protect you from yourself. He nodded slightly. I get that now. I just don't think I'll get the chance to start over. Everyone does, I said. They just don't get to make the same mistake twice. Marcus smiled faintly. You still sound like you're teaching a class. I'm just stating the truth, I replied. In that moment, I realized there was no anger left between us. Just two people who had walked through the same storm, each carrying their own scar. When he stood up to leave, I added, Live as if someone's still watching over you, even when there isn't. He nodded, turned, and walked out. I watched him blend into the crowd, disappearing like smoke. After that meeting, I never thought about Marcus again. I returned to my work at Viridian, where everything was moving forward. The Aegis project, the comprehensive financial security system my team and I had built, was entering its final testing phase. Watching the clean, stable lines of code run on the screen filled me with quiet pride. This system didn't just detect violations. It learned how to keep people from repeating the same ones. On launch day, Ethan took the stage to introduce Aegis. When he said my name, the audience stood and applauded. I was never one for spotlights, but in that moment, I knew my work was no longer invisible. After his speech, Ethan came to me and said quietly, You know, someday people will talk about E7.4 the way they talk about turning points in governance. I smiled. I just want them to understand that discipline isn't a chain. It's the structure that allows freedom to exist. That evening, I left the building as the city lights came alive. The wind carried a trace of salt and the distant sound of ships. I walked along the riverbank, the reflections glittering like shards of glass. Something inside me closed, like a chapter finally written to its end. I thought about the journey, from the woman whose photo had once been pinned to a wall to the one who built a system that made an entire company rethink what fairness meant. I hadn't defeated anyone. I had reclaimed my voice. When I returned home, there was an email waiting. No subject line. Thank you for not destroying me, M. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Not out of disdain, but because it was over. Forgiveness doesn't need proof. I opened the window and took a deep breath. Across the river, the Viridian headquarters shimmered against the night sky like a sign. I thought of Ethan's words from our very first meeting. Build something strong enough that even the weakest will be protected. I smiled. That's exactly what I had done, and what I would keep doing. That night, I wrote one line in my journal. Sometimes the lesson isn't in winning, it's in knowing when to stop. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and let the city sleep under its fog. My life had come full circle, and for the first time, I stood at the center of it, where there was no more noise, only the calm of someone who had finally learned the meaning of discipline, of freedom, and of herself.